Hi, everyone. Pastor Galen, lead pastor at Shine Hills Church. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. We hope that these podcasts will be a real encouragement to you on your spiritual journey. You can also connect with Shine Hills at shinehills.org. Hope you enjoy the program.
We are across the street and around the world. Shine Hills.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Nathan, welcome.
Good to see you,
Kind
Galen.
of a hot summer day here
I'm
today
thankful for it,
Wyoming. So are you ready? Do you do Frontier Days?
Well, I'd love to, but
Yeah.
every year they've had Frontier Days. The last 3 years in a row, I've been asked to speak somewhere else in the United States.
Oh,
So next week,
So you're on the speaking tour thing. I forgot about that. You're kind
I'll
of
be in
kind
Arizona.
of a big deal.
Talk about hot.
What do you? Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, you better go point to point quick, right?
Right.
So where are you speaking?
Well, it's going to be at the Statesman Academy, and
Okay.
we have around 350 people, legislators and congressmen from around the country,
Wow.
and then all of the groups, 42 state groups, get together for our Statesman Academy, and it's going to be wonderful. This year, it's at this sounds glorious, but it's hot,
Yeah.
at the Ritz-Carlton in Marana, Arizona.
Okay.
The thing about the Ritz-Carlton is it's much cheaper to get a hold of in Arizona in the middle of the summer.
Yeah, I
so-
bet it is. I bet that's true. Okay, so can you give us any hints of what you're talking about?
Oh,
Or
yeah,
what's it?
absolutely. I'm going to actually reach in and use the scripture, which is one of the things they've asked. Is one
Okay.
of the few pastoral background guys that's actively involved like this. I want to actually talk about how John said, "He must increase and I must decrease," and what that means for everyone in the Christian life.
All right.
And so when we look at that, and I'm going to talk about what it means to be a person elected into politics. And one of the things people all over the country right now are walking around telling everybody where they're the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
And you have to stop and ask, yes, you can explain that you are the best person in this particular race. That's why you're running. On the other hand, it's because you are surrendered to something that matters
Oh, yeah.
before God. And so what does it mean that he must increase and I must decrease? And so we're going to explore that together.
That
It's gonna be
is
great.
awesome. I really like to. I want to hear that already.
Mhm.
So that's fantastic. Well, I actually had a run in with a politician, and I think you know this guy's name. I'm going to try to say it. Brian Schrader.
Right.
He's a superintendent of public instruction,
Right.
in elected office, I believe.
Right. So he was appointed.
He's appointed, okay.
Just it's an elected office, but he was appointed to fill the rest. I think this was last year, of Superintendent Jillian Balo's term,
Okay.
because she moved to Virginia, and so he was appointed into that position, and now he's running this
Okay.
year.
Well, we've got a new director for our Christian school,
Good.
and she invited him out because she had some questions that she wanted to ask concerning Christian schools and concerning schools in general. And I got to sit down with him and
Yeah.
pick his brain on a few things. But there was one thing that happened. I don't know. I don't think this was confidential, but he was just talking about some of the things that's going on in our world. But one of the things that he talked about is that the USDA is basically saying you have to adopt these certain things. And I think it's gender identification, some of those things. And if you don't, then we're not going to pay for your schools at your state. And that's like a $40 million sentence I just said right there.
That's right.
Okay. And so basically, long story short, he and Wyoming is in a position to basically say, we're going to reject that,
Hmm.
and we can fund those dollars ourselves in house.
Right.
So we don't have to rely on the feds. And by the way, we don't want to adopt those policies.
That's right.
Well, there's a lot of things that went off in my head, and I wanted to ask you a bajillion questions. So that's why I'm going to ask you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I've been walking hand in hand with
So
that
you know,
whole
you're
subject.
familiar with this.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's news to me. First of all, I thought it was interesting, just the fact that our state coffers are healthy. Because last time
Yeah,
I
they
heard that they were not healthy.
Right.
Can you explain what has happened there?
Sure. Wyoming is a wonderful thing, and we have to be very thoughtful about the way that we do this. But Wyoming has long had a boom-bust cycle. And so
Yeah.
we'll have a lot of money that comes in during the need for energy resources, because Wyoming is one of the foremost energy resources, not only in the United States, but in the world.
Yeah, wow.
And so we've had a boom. Then we'll have a bust. Energy will begin to decline. There will be different things that will happen. And we've gone into long troughs of not having enough money
Right.
on a yearly basis to make it. So a number of years ago, and I applaud them. In the early 2000s, there was a group of people that got together and began to talk about how can we, in the next boom, begin to put money away so that at least the basic functions of government can make it.
Wow.
And they did a great job. And so we have, at this point, I think it's a little over $20 billion in the bank, but they're put in different silos so that they're dedicated to funding different aspects of government.
Gotcha.
Now, one of the things that has crunched that is education. And that has happened since about 2000. I listened to a man a number of years ago. He was the then president of the Senate. And he made the statement that if we don't correct some of our over expenditure in education, we were going to drain through the entirety of the money that had been set aside for schools.
Wow.
And we're actually going to start pulling on the other aspects of budget that are very important.
Right.
And sure enough, actually about a year before he anticipated, we had blown through all of our savings on that.
Oh, wow.
And we're still we're still unbalanced.
So education is underfunded right now, or they're drained their budget.
They've drained their budget, and
Gotcha.
it's because they're so overfunded.
Gotcha. Oh, gotcha. Oh, gotcha. All right. So I think that was fascinating. So is it oil, natural gas, coal, or is coal still a commodity for us?
So over the last 10 years, coal has dropped dramatically in how much is being sold and what is being sold for. And partly that's because of the rise of natural gas.
Yeah.
For a long time, natural gas did really well for the state of Wyoming, but technologies that were developed here in the Pinedale anticline have been used now in places like Pennsylvania and other places to mine natural gas much closer to the market. And so we still produce lots of natural gas, but nowhere near like what we used to. And so natural gas actually has declined in its cost relatively to coal.
Yeah. And so most of their coffers are filled by then just oil, the new exploration of drilling.
Exactly.
Interesting. No, that's good to know. Because those were some of the questions I had. It's like, wow, I didn't know we had a healthy budget anywhere. I've not heard anybody talk about that. The other thing is that what exactly is being held off? If we say to the USDA, no, thank you, we can handle our own school lunch. And by the way, he was saying that there is South Dakota, and I think North Dakota and Montana and Idaho.
Over 20 states now.
Is that right?
Over 20.
That are saying, hey, we're going to resist your offer here.
Right.
You keep your money, we'll keep our values where we want them. Is that right?
Yeah, I could give a little bit of an overview here.
Yeah.
So first of all, coming back to your original question about how much money this is. So the first report was going to be about $90 million. But practically it's just a little over $40 million. But mind you, that's with an almost $2 billion budget.
Okay.
So the federal government is giving a tiny piece of the overall budget, but it was a clear case of tail wag dog.
Yeah.
And they were demanding through the use of USDA in Title IX, they were going to demand that if we wanted to accept their school lunch funding program money, that we would have to basically overturn biology in the classroom.
Yeah.
I.e., what that means is, I wrote a memo on this, and I'll tell you a story about but here's what it says. On page 530 of their menu, they say this: biological distinctions between male and female are presumptively a form of prohibited sex discrimination. What they're saying is, if you believe that boys are boys and girls are girls, if you agree with biology, you're a discriminator.
Yeah.
And so obviously that is just wrong. But as you look at that, they were demanding that we concede the idea that truth is truth and that there is biology in the world, right, to receive this pittance of funding. Now, some school districts already, this was back about 8 years ago, have already moved away from the federal funding of school lunch programs because they could do it better, faster, cheaper. I remember one school in Meeteetse, Wyoming. They have ranchers there that would donate a beef. They would and do all these different things, and they could feed their children cheaper than what it cost to feed them by, at the time, Michelle Obama's guidelines.
Okay.
And so when we look at the practicality of this, it's one where this has gotten way out of hand.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I think it's fascinating. I admired, we've been talking about courage, and I admire the courage that he had to, bring it up to the governor and say, hey, this is something I'm concerned about, and that they sought it out and really made a decision, and then found out later there's a lot of states that are standing against. And so there's a courage that's collective. And I actually asked him that question because I was kind of dovetailing off my sermon a couple weeks ago, I think. But the courage is contagious. And I said, so when you hear from those other people, in those other states, does that build courage in you? And he goes, oh, absolutely. He said, you just realize, and in confidence, and what do you call them? The attorney general, some of these things, they say, no, they can't do that. That's going to be a lawsuit if they do such and such. I'm not saying this one, but other things.
Right.
And that does build a confidence and a courage that to stand firm and say, no, we're going to stand on this principle here.
Right.
Anyway, so I thought it was interesting that he's like human.
Well, that's a good thing to know, right?
Yeah.
What's so important is what you just said is something that has to be shared with every single human being around the world, but in everyone that's listening right now. So, in their ability to stand right now on important issues.
Yeah.
Yesterday, as we're taping this, I received a text message along with a few other people early in the morning that was talking about the town of Torrington, so Goshen County School District number 1. They had on their agenda, it was supposed to just be a report on Title IX and Biden's new policies that were being included in it. And in this report, what people started talking about, they had just found out, one of the school board members found out that morning that there actually was supposed to be some sort of vote or an action taken on that, whether they were going to accept it or not.
Okay.
What they found out, though, was that there were a number of people kind of tilting toward adopting these rules from the Biden administration. And so one of the things that we did is we started calling people all over the state and saying, listen, do you know that this is happening? They're trying to fly this in with no one watching, and it's going to be absolutely devastating.
So you were getting phone calls out during the school board meeting?
Yes, that's right.
Is that right?
Prior to the school board meeting, right?
My gosh.
And so what we began to do is put together a memo. I drafted up a 2-page memo and then grabbed a bunch of information from Colorado Springs on this very subject. And here's one of the things that was mentioned. These are proposed rules. First of all, no one should be taking action on them, first of all.
Wow.
And secondly, when you jump into what they're getting at, these are some of the most extensive and problematic things that have ever been proposed for schools. And so they were going to change the definition of sexual orientation and gender identity to the definition of sex in the statute. And what that means is that they were going to, under the new rules, say that biological distinctions between male and female, just saying that, is a form of sex discrimination.
Wow.
Then it obviously opens the door to the idea of misgendering.
Okay.
That if a little boy claims to be a girl or a girl a boy, if because of your own conscience and the understanding that you need to speak truth into the world by saying truthful things, that if a teacher or someone else misgenders, is how the radical left pushes this whole idea.
Yeah.
If you misgender, then you're also discriminating. Yeah. And you start going down the line, all of these different things. And we also know, just from a decision made last month in something called West Virginia versus EPA, that the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, has already pushed back against the idea that these agencies can dictate such sweeping changes across the nation. And so all of these, that's the reason why, and it's Governor Kristi Noem in South Dakota that's really grabbing all these states and pushing back against this massive overreach of federal government. But it's important for Christians to stand up, and we saw the effect of it last night. That school board voted against accepting those Title IX recommendations. 5-3, I believe, is what I saw.
So do you think, did they get the memos that you sent out?
I believe so.
Oh my gosh,
that's what I'm hearing. And it was just all of these voices working together.
So what would be the consequence? Let's say a school board adopts this. What would the consequence if a teacher misgenders and they call him on the carpet because they misgendered this student? I mean, is that being fired? What is that? Do you think it looks like?
A few years ago here in Cheyenne, we had started this new position for a diversity officer.
Yes, I've heard this.
Right.
Is it in place? And
Well, so from what I understand, that has been scaled back dramatically with some of the things that have happened over the last year and a half, and that some of that's been discussed on this broadcast right here. But that was one of the things Torrington was going to do. They were proposing that they hire a diversity coordinator as well. And whenever you hire this specific kind of diversity coordinator, all of their accreditation and everything else comes through through very radical leftist groups. And so literally you're baking into the school system radical leftist ideology.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to ever come back from
okay,
that.
so here's another layer of this question. So if a school can enforce this kind of, if the teacher says, I'm not going to participate in this, they could be fired if they don't participate in the gender identity. And what about in the community and in the church? If a church says, then we're not going to participate in that gender misqualification of it, is there anything as punishable in any way there, either public or in the church?
Well, that's the long-term effect of what would happen. So currently in the United States of America that I'm aware of, that can't happen, but we already see the trend line because in Canada it can.
I know it. That's right.
And so we often follow the United Kingdom and Canada just a generation or so later.
Yeah.
And so when you look at a forced ideology, we have to start standing up now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we go the path of losing our freedoms, which is exactly what's happening in Canada and the UK.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, on that cheery note, do you have any good news that we can unpack before we let everybody go?
Well, yes, I do. I believe that
actually was good news that they shot that down.
They did.
And the fact that your calling tree worked.
That's right, right.
That's awesome.
And it was a team of people all across the state.
Is that
and it was just really wonderful. One of the things, though, I think that we can see is that when good people stand up, that evil doesn't have to prevail.
Yeah.
It's kind of a phrase that Edmund Burke had used, evil triumphs when good men do nothing.
Yeah.
But when good people will stand up, then that's Daniel 11, I think it's 35b says that the people who know their God will stand firm and take action. And what that literally was talking about in that prophecy was when adversity would come to the future nation of Israel. We later knew it as the rule of Antiochus Epiphanes. When you look at the fact that people who know their God will take a stand and then actually will be compelled into action against it, then that is exactly the disposition of men and women of faith who will stand for truth, regardless of the personal consequences.
That's a really good picture because, you see that in Romans whenever you've done everything to stand firm, therefore. But this is a little different nuance in the Old Testament. And Daniel is saying stand firm, but also that stance as implying an action. Is that how you phrase that?
Right.
Yeah.
Another
really
translation says, and will do great exploits, but it means the same thing.
Well, we need those to be emboldened, and I actually feel splashes of courage around.
Amen.
This is another example of that, and I do hope that this courage catches on and has a ripple effect because, our Supreme Court made some really strong decisions that gave us courage to say that our our Constitution is being upheld.
That's right.
And it's built confidence in me. I don't know if other pulpits around, but. And then here's a school board that had a victory, and so based on some information, right?
Right.
And so we're counting on people like you to give us that information so we can stand strong. Wow, that's good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us today, and Nathan, thanks for joining us. Good luck on you're speaking to the Statesman Academy.
That's right.
Is that right? That's exciting. So I hope that goes. I know it'll go awesome. So good luck to you. For all of you. From all of us, be strong and very courageous. God bless you guys.